Deputy Fitzmaurice.
Well, thanks for coming in. I noticed that you say you go by science and everything, is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would have seen the EPA going into court saying that in relation to peat bogs, that they were hydrologically connected to the whole bog. As you are aware, when you brought a case in the last few weeks, when you were asked for the evidence and the science of that, you had none to produce, even though you believe in science. And a person, an ordinary person, had to spend large amounts of money hydrologically and ecologically to show that they weren't connected. And you had nothing to counteract that. So do you believe in science or do you believe in your own theory?
We believe in science, and the case that I believe you're referring to is a case we took in the district court in relation to extraction of peat, and the charges were dismissed. The reason those charges were dismissed is because we didn't reach the threshold required for a criminal conviction. So it's not to suggest that we don't believe in science. In that case,
but you've stated several times.
If I could just finish, because the context is important here. In that particular case, we didn't reach the threshold required to secure a criminal conviction. But we have had other successful prosecutions in the district court in relation to the unlawful extraction of peat.
The reason
we have secured injunctions in the High Court in relation to the unlawful extraction of peat, and we have cases ongoing before the courts. So to connect our science with one particular case, I don't think is accurate.
Well, first of all, the problem is that the others hadn't gone and spent, unfortunately, they mightn't have the wherewithal to spend the large amounts of money required to have it in your arse pocket when you go into court, the science hydrologically and ecologically to show we would have done it on a private capacity with the national parks, and it is been well verified and peer reviewed that they're not hydrologically connected. But unfortunately, some people suffered at your hands, even though you believe in the science, and you had no science to give that to. I think that needs to be put on the record. In relation to the water quality, how many rivers are there in Ireland?
We have 3,200 river water bodies.
Are all those monitored?
Of those, 2,800 are monitored.
And when you say you monitor them, tell me how often every year is there samples taken on those 2,800?
Do you want me to do it?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So we have different stations for different purposes. The stations that are used in the report that we're speaking about today, the interim assessment, are part of our surveillance network, which are our highest frequency monitoring. So in rivers, for example, there'll be samples taken monthly for nutrients.
How many? How many rivers monthly?
We have, I'll just get you the precise numbers there. So for the purposes of this report, in the network that we used...
No. Just tell me how many are done monthly. That's all I want to know. Out of the 3,000, say that figure again. 3,200, is it, or 3,000?
So 3,200 rivers.
Yeah.
2,900 actually are monitored in total. That's all water bodies, though.
Why don't the other 300, or what's the reason? Can you explain that?
Well, we're not obliged under the WFD, the Water Framework Directive, to monitor everything, everywhere, every time. All member states' networks would be designed to be representative. Okay. Ireland has one of the highest densities of monitoring networks in the member states. We're second, in fact, with one monitoring station, 38 monitoring stations to cover 1,000 square kilometres. So we have a very high density network.
Right, and how many did you say is monthly monitored?
So for the river sites, there are 179 river water bodies in what we call our surveillance network, which is our most frequently monitored network. And that's 12 times a year for nutrients.
Right.
And once every 3 years for the biology.
And once every, so is this just to explain it to me now, I just want to get my head around this. In the 179, we'll say, you put them as, we'll just call them tier 1. Would that be fair to say? They're 12 times they're monitored for what?
for the physicochemical parameters, as we call them, so that we are nitrogen and phosphorus.
Right, okay. And then there's a 3-year test, is there?
The 3-year test then is about the biological indicators, so
Okay.
the insects and the fish and the plants.
Right, that's the 179. So tell me about the other 2,721.
The rest of them then are in our operational network, as we call it. And within that network then, we'd be monitoring our nutrients 4 times a year. And we would be looking at our biology at the same frequency, so that would be once every 3 years.
Of the 2,900 or the 2,700?
Just to correct the record, Deputy, I gave you actually the total number there of all the water body types. So if we're just going to focus in on rivers, it's actually 2,429 rivers of the 3,200 are monitored.
2,400 are monitored?
2,429 river water bodies are monitored, yeah.
Well, just to put it simple for people that'll be listening in, is it 2,429 rivers are monitored?
Yeah.
Just that people don't know, because water bodies might just, put them out. So there's 800 then not monitored, roughly.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, not monitored at all. And 179 of those then are priority, would that be fair to say?
They're the surveillance network, yeah, the highest frequency.
They're done monthly and 3-yearly, is that?
Yeah.
Right, and the other 2,200 or 2,000, 2,211, they're done 4 times a year, as you're saying?
4 times a year for the nutrients.
The 2,200.
And then once every 3 years for the biology in the same manner as the tier 1, as you've referred to them as.
And in the line of just the criteria, and I'm involved in the group water scheme, so I would have seen going back, say, 20 years ago, to comply with EU rules and comply with the different things you have to test for, the level and the threshold has gone up. The EU, it's a higher standard now you have to do. Would that be the same case for ye?
The directive that we're discussing today, the nitrates directive, has been in place since 1991, so the standards there haven't changed.
So it's the same thing that you're looking at.
Yeah.
There would be, and Senator Lombard would have brought up this before, there has actually rivers improved where there would be high derogation areas. Would that be fair to say? Going by the figures that we would have seen.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Where are you talking about?
Down south in Cork, I think it was. What's the name of that area too? Timoleague.
Timoleague, yeah. We're very well aware of that.
And could you tell me, when there's a high rate of derogation down there, how do the rivers improve if farmers are such culprits that you're?
Well, you're talking about Teagasc's agricultural catchments programme, which measures over a limited area down in Timoleague, and broadly, I mean, we're very aware of what they're doing there. Jenny sits on the steering committee for this programme and have been in good contact with Teagasc on this. Broadly, we are seeing the same trends in our monitoring in that region, which is more extensive. We monitor over a much larger area compared to the agricultural catchments programme, but broadly we're seeing the same trends, except for the fact that they see nitrate levels going down in 2022. We don't see that. We're seeing them increase in 2022. So we really need to understand what's happening in that programme. It's positive. We would really like to see the results replicated on a wider basis. As I said, we're not seeing it in our data. Hopefully it will continue into 2023 and those practices that are in place in that catchment that they have in the programme will be replicated throughout that area.
Okay. Could you just explain to me that we would know, unfortunately, a lot of towns that wouldn't have sewage treatment plants, and say a river meanders through farmland and it meanders through forestry, and I know you'd be looking for the different water bodies. Can you distinguish between what comes out of a septic tank, and the different types of nitrogen? Can you distinguish all that foolproof?
Yeah, we can.
You can?
Yeah, that's right.
Right. In the line of phosphorus, there was certain areas that looked to be high in phosphorus. What would you put that down to?
Jenny, do you want to come in and talk?
Yeah, so the sources of phosphorus are 50-50 really in the main with agriculture and urban wastewater when you look at the national scale. But the portion of that comes from humans is most of it is actually discharged around the coast. 40% in fact of the state's urban wastewater is discharged via Ringsend in Dublin. So when we look at, to go back to the question you asked, Deputy, about when we're looking at a particular river, how do we distinguish it? So we start off with, as Emer was saying earlier, with the actual water quality and the signatures in the water. So we take the sample and we see what's in it. And then we go back up into the catchment to figure out how many cows, how many people, where are the trees, what are the activities going on in each of those, for each of those water bodies that we assess. And it's quite a robust, integrated scientific assessment. We do use peer-reviewed models.
Just a question for me. How do you know how many cows is in the area?
We get the data from DAFRM.
From the Department of Agriculture?
Yeah.
It's farmers' details, yeah?
We get the LIPIS data and the AIMS data, yeah, under a data sharing agreement.
Okay. Right, that's interesting. And in the line of phosphorus, you're saying it's 50-50?
At the national scale, it's 50-50.
The national scale. Is there a huge problem? I would put it an awful lot different in looking at areas around where there's no sewage treatment plants and where raw sewage goes out into rivers, which is common in an awful place in the west of Ireland. No one even comes near taking samples. Would you agree with that?
Yeah,
Do you want to?
Yeah, the urban wastewater. So, you know, the EPA is the regulator for Irish water. There's about 1,000. The EPA for Ishka and for the licensed.
But sure, hold on. If you haven't a septic tank, if you haven't a sewage treatment plant, how can you have the EPA or
septic tanks are separate, so there's a threshold.
No. But there's towns that don't have a sewage treatment plant. What happens then?
So there's 26 towns and villages which are discharging, which are of sufficient size and are discharging raw sewage to the environment, which is totally unacceptable, and the EPA have called that out.
Way more. Like you get 26 in County Galway.
So these must be smaller agglomerations.
Yeah, but we call it town if there's a shop in it and a pub or whatever.
So we're able to distinguish the
large towns that have mixed sewers as well, stormwater and sewage. Yeah. And I know in my town, when we get heavy rain, the town floods, and the treatment plant, they just open their sluice gates and let it straight into the river shore.
Yeah. So going back to our overall national assessment, we know there's about 1,000 water bodies impacted by agriculture, there's about 200 impacted by wastewater, and about 160 impacted by septic tanks and domestic systems. So we can distinguish where there is a problem with water quality, as Jenny and Anima have explained. We can look at what is the problem in that water body, what's going on in that environment and in that catchment that is a potential source of that. So yes, we have, as a state, problems with wastewater. We know where they are. There's a lot of investment happening in terms of
Is phosphorus is the sewage the big problem mostly with the, because you can see the areas and you generally pick out where there's no sewage treatment plant.
Yeah, and you can see that on a map if you look at areas where we have wastewater. But if you look at the map in our report on page 21, which shows the areas where agriculture and phosphorus are a problem, those areas highlighted in blue and navy, they're the areas where we have a problem with phosphorus, and our assessment tells us that's from agriculture. So you can pinpoint, similarly as you can.
Are those assessments gettable for the likes of the committee?
They're all the time now, Michael.
Yeah, we publish all our data.
All the data is available to the committee.
Is available.
Right, and just one final question, thanks, Chair. There's 800, which is a quarter, or 800 would be a third of the 2.4. If we're looking at 179 high priority, why, and we're not looking at 800 rivers at all, how can we say, like, it's like saying, if I look at 4 of the cattle or if I look at 12 of the cattle, that 16 of them is bad. How can you say when you don't analyse all the different places, when there's some analysing every 3 years, and I know you're going to say it complies with the EU, like the analogy I would give you is that if you were on a water scheme and you could have a coliform, and if you scour the system, you can get it out of it, right? And then you'd be perfect. But actually, it's a non-compliance if you have one coliform. That's the problem. And how can we sort of take, yes, there's 179 you're looking at every month, but the others aren't as watched as tight. How can you do an accurate guide when you're, at the moment, your document is going to be the be-all and the end-all of an application for a derogation that will be going to the European Commission. And like, when you do stuff, you need to have it foolproof. In my opinion, if you do something, the 179 is 12 times. There's another 2,200, it's a longer span. You could hit it one day and it could be one way and it clears itself out. A river can clear itself. And then there's 800 that's not looked at all. How can you sort of say that it's not favourable or less favourable, or like I've seen all this in different scientific stuff done. How can you be like basically foolproof on such an important document going to Europe or stand over it? Like I think the first thing that should be done is that it should be independently reviewed. But how, in your opinion, can you stand over that when basically the lives of a lot of people is at risk here?
Okay, there was this one.
Yeah, I mean, the question you're asking is how do we know our water monitoring is representative of what's happening across the country? And we have the second highest density in terms of the design and distribution of our sites across the country, and that is reviewed on a regular basis by the Commission under the Water Framework Directive and under the Nitrates Directive. So they're looking at this, making sure that every country is comparable, that was consistent, that when you start comparing one country with another, that each is actually telling an accurate story of what's happening. So this is something that runs to the heart of our monitoring, that what we are seeing, we have our points around the country that give an accurate picture. We're monitoring 3,000 water bodies. That gives us an extremely dense network and an extremely high quality picture of what's happening in the country. In terms of the frequency, Jenny has outlined the frequency of our monitoring. The biology is what I would point out to you in terms of we might miss something, in terms of something being released and then washed through. The biology is a really important part of our monitoring. That tells you what's happening in terms of the life in the water, be it macrophytes, algae. We're looking at that on a constant basis. That gives you an integrated picture. If something is being polluted periodically, if there was a large episode, we will either see it through our nutrient monitoring, our nitrogen, our phosphorus, or we will see it through the biology, and they will line up, they will be aligned. The biology gives us the overall picture. So you can be assured, Deputy, that it is giving us a very high quality picture of what's happening in terms of water quality in Ireland from the range of parameters that we're measuring.
Okay.